Have you ever worked with someone who's incredibly smart, incredibly capable, and somehow still seemed to make everything harder? Maybe every decision had to go through them. Maybe they had to approve every little thing. Or maybe they're constantly fixing everyone's problem. Maybe, just maybe, that person is you. Friend, before you click away, just stay with me, okay? Because if you're like me, ambitious, high performing, chances are you've already developed the habits that helped you become successful. But those same habits might be quietly limiting your leadership. And here's the tricky part. Those habits aren't showing up as obvious mistakes. They're showing up disguised as excellence. They're hiding behind phrases like, I'm just trying to maintain quality. I just want things done right. I really don't have the time to explain it. I'll just do it myself. Any of that sound familiar, friend? Today, I want to talk to you about 3 leadership shifts that can completely transform how your team experiences you. And not just that, but how much success your team is capable of creating without you carrying the whole entire weight of the world on your shoulders. Let's get into it. The first point I want to make is that it's very important for you to take an honest look at your habits to clear out the, let's just call it ego noise. Can we have a real conversation for a second? Most leaders don't have a strategy problem. Now, I don't want you to be offended, so just hear me out, okay? Research from the organizational psychologist Tasha Eurich found that while about 95% of people believe they're self-aware, only about 10 to 15% actually are. Think about that for a second. 95 think they are, but only 10 to 15% actually are. Most of us are just walking around convinced we know exactly how we're showing up. Well, in our marriage, my husband and I have a marriage ministry, and one of the exercises that we have seen done and we really enjoyed was the exercise of holding up your hand. And when you hold up your hand, you can't see what's going on back here. Only the person facing that can see that. You see this side, right? So it's absolutely impossible for you to know what this person is receiving from you. They have to tell you, right? So we think we're doing one thing and coming across one way, but the reality of the situation is we just may not be. So most of us are walking around convinced we know exactly how we're showing up. Meanwhile, as just demonstrated with the hand exercise, our team is having a completely different experience. That's what I'm talking about when I say ego noise. That's all the stories that we tell ourselves about why we do what we do. I have high standards, maybe. Or maybe you're struggling to trust that others can get the job done. I'm detailed oriented, maybe. Or maybe you've become addicted to control. I just care about results, maybe. Or maybe you're afraid of failure. And listen, no judgment. We've all been there. Most of us learn these habits because they work. You became successful because you were dependable. You became successful because you paid attention to detail. You became successful, quite frankly, because you outworked everybody else in the room. But the issue is leadership requires a completely different set of skills than achievement. Achievement says, let me do it. A leader says, let me develop someone else who can. And if we're being honest, friend, those just are not the same thing. The strongest leaders I've ever met regularly ask themselves, is this behavior helping my team grow or helping me feel safe? That's a tough question, but it's a powerful one. Because sometimes the biggest obstacle in the room isn't the challenge. It's the leader's attachment to being right, being needed, or being the smartest person in the room. Before we move on to point number 2, if this even sounds remotely like something that you've been dealing with or that you're struggling with, I highly recommend that you use the link down in my description to join a 5-day mini course that I've created called the Executive Alignment Framework Leadership Intensive. It is going to be very helpful in helping you to identify where some of these challenges might be lying for you. So that is going to be down in the description. And if you have enjoyed this first point, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button and click that notification bell so you never miss an episode. All right, now let's go ahead and dive into point number 2, where we are going to be dropping the corporate mask. So let's talk about something that does not get discussed enough. That mask we cover ourselves up in our corporate world. You know what I'm talking about. the polished version, the always confident version, the version that never struggles, never doubts, never makes mistakes, and never has a bad day. For years, many leaders were taught that professionalism meant emotional distancing. But research says something very different. Studies from Gallup consistently show that trust is one of the strongest predictors of employee engagement, retention, productivity, and performance. And trust does not come from perfection. Trust comes from authenticity. People don't connect with perfect. People connect with real. Now, let me be clear here. I'm not suggesting that you show up crying around your staff meetings, right? What I'm saying is this. Your team doesn't need a superhero. They need a human. They need to know that the person leading them understands their pressure, understands mistakes, and understands growth. Because when leaders pretend to have it all together or having all the answers, teams stop asking questions. When leaders pretend they never struggle, employees start hiding their challenges. When leaders pretend they're flawless, innovation dies out. Why is this? Well, because nobody feels safe enough to take risks. One of the greatest gifts you can give your team is permission to be a human, just by being a human yourself. Sometimes the fastest way to build trust isn't demonstrating strength, it's demonstrating honesty. Okay, moving on to point number 3 that I want to make here is to stop leading with an I want you to do what I say mindset. Now let's talk about leadership styles here for a moment. Many of us were raised professionally in environments where leadership looked like this. I'm the boss. I'm the one with the title. Do what I say. Research from Deloitte and multiple workplace studies consistently show that collaborative teams outperform isolated decision making because employees feel ownership of outcomes. Think about that for a second. Ownership. People support what they help to create. If you've ever had someone resist a decision that you've made, it may not be because they disagreed. It just might be because they didn't feel included. The best leaders aren't creating followers. They're creating thinkers. They're creating problem solvers. They're creating future leaders. So instead of asking, how do I get people to listen to me? Ask this instead. How do I get people to think like me? That's a completely different leadership mindset. One creates dependence, the other creates capability. One creates bottlenecks, the other creates momentum. And if you're constantly exhausted as a leader, there's a good chance you're carrying decisions that your team is fully capable of helping you to solve. You don't have to have all the answers, friend. You just need to create an environment where the best answers can emerge. Now, if there's one thing I want you to remember from today's video, it's this. The greatest threat to your leadership isn't incompetence. It's unconscious habits. The habits you have developed to become successful may not be the habits required to become transformational. The next level of leadership isn't becoming more impressive. It's about becoming more aware, more authentic, more collaborative. Because leadership isn't about proving how smart you are. It's about creating an environment where everyone around you becomes smarter, stronger, and more capable. And if you're ambitious and high performing like me, you want to build that kind of leadership presence, confidence, emotional intelligence, and influence. So if you enjoyed this video, please make sure again that you are subscribed. Make sure that you click the thumbs up because that tells YouTube you liked it. And leave me a comment down below. Let's talk about this idea of, transforming our leadership style and becoming the better version of ourselves. Let me hear from you. Make sure that you're checking out that first pinned comment because I do have a link to the Executive Alignment Framework Leadership Intensive in there, as well as a link in the description. So make sure you check that out. Because around here, we're not just building successful careers. We're building leaders who are aligned with who they are, what they want, and how they want to show up in the world. And trust me, that changes everything. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching today's video. See you next time. Bye.